So I asked my mom's like, if we don't have a lot of money, why do we like let all these people live with us all the time? And mom said, that's what God would want us to do. He wants us to serve others. Because I had some friends that were at Stanford, it felt attainable to me. And so I decided to apply to Stanford. And thinking back on it now, it's like kind of crazy. I also remember my dad telling me when I was applying to Stanford, he said, why do you apply to Harvard as well? And I said, Dad, come on, that's Harvard. Like, no way I'm getting into Harvard. I never felt like I was behind intellectually. I just felt like I hadn't had exposure to as many things as my classmates had. But I always felt that confidence, and I always knew that I could work hard, and I feel like I got that from my upbringing. The most important conversations that we have are the ones that we have with ourselves. We wake up with them, we walk around with them, we go to bed with them, and eventually we act on them. I don't know, like, yeah, pickleball is just so fun. It's like such a social sport.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to Nation News. Our mission is to connect and inspire our Islander community by sharing Islander success stories with everyone. So stay tuned for the full episode. Today, I'm super happy to have on Jon Lautaha on the show, and he's a Tongan, Stanford, and Duke MBA alum. He's a really cool guy who's looking to do big things in pickleball, but we'll talk more on that later. Thanks for taking the time, Jon, and really excited to get talking with you today.
Yeah, for sure. It's great to meet you, Dean, and I've loved getting to know you, and it's an honor to be on your podcast.
Yeah. Sounds good. Sounds good. I think diving into really your early story is where your parents from and how did you end up in La Ia growing up?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, as you know, as a lot of people listening to this might know, there's a lot of Tongans in Lahia. My dad he's from Vavahu, he's from the island of Lape. Um, and my mom is from Hawaii, and they both immigrated to the United States to go to school at BYU, Hawaii. They had known each other in high school and then reconnected, in college. Uh, and they got married and settled in Lahia, and that's where I was born and raised. Yeah.
So being in La Ia, because I remember the first time I went out there, it was probably when I was like in middle school or something. And it was really the first time in my life where I was really hit by the culture because I went to PCC for my first time ever. So what was it like if you can think back to the first time you ever went to PCC, which for those who don't know, Polynesian Cultural Center is an amazing place. What was that like for you and how was it being around all these Polynesians?
Yeah, for sure. You don't really like, it's like the whole like fish in a fishbowl kind of thing. You don't realize, what you have until you get out of that environment. But, growing up, it was just normal to have such a diverse community, not just Tongans, but obviously all different types of Polynesian cultures. Um, like, my best friends growing up were like Tongans, Asians, like Balangi, and and it was just normal to us to be in a community like that. And it wasn't until I went away from home, um, that, especially now living in North Carolina, there's no, I'm trying to think there's a few other Polynesians in like probably within like a 30-mile radius of us. But, yeah, growing up in the culture, it was just amazing because it's the whole mentality of, the village raising the child. Um, you know, all your friends' parents are your uncle and auntie, and they take care of you just like they take care of your kids. Um, and that was, always felt love from the community and love, um, from, everyone that I interacted with. And it's a special place, and you don't really, you don't realize what you have until you're gone, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah.
No, that's how it is because I think I heard it from a podcast. Do you know Doug Fiafia? He's doing big things
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Salt Lake. Yeah, he was talking about how, like, in the Tongan language, we don't have a word for cousin because it's like brothers and sisters all around. And thinking back to it, it's kind of the same way where I took it for granted. I always grew up around my cousins, like literally in the same household, just trying to make ends meet. And it's kind of that same way of how we're all so closely connected. And I heard this thing from my uncle. He said, "You'll never meet a homeless Tongan because there's always family to take them in." And that's something that really always s it was really important to me when I first heard it, and so it's really cool to see, like, that's how it is in Hawaii, especially with all the polys out there, like, in Kahuku, and so when you were going to school out there, what were you thinking was the next step? Were you, like, a sports guy or academics guy, and how are you gonna make it out of going on to the world?
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I'll answer your question, but just going back to what you were saying about like you'll never meet a homeless Tongan guy. That's so funny. I hadn't heard that quote before, but yeah, growing up, my mom worked at BYU Hawaii. My dad worked at PC my whole life. Um, and because they worked at BYU Hawaii, there's always all these Tongan students at BYU Hawaii that would come live with us. And like, my parents didn't, I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and my parents didn't own a home until, I was like, uh, until like basically I was, in middle school, and, they could barely afford a home. But, even with like the constraints financially that we had, they were always taking in, um, other people that needed a place to stay, and they still do it, now. Uh, and I think that was just, I share this because that was an important lesson to me. I remember one time our family was like really poor, we were struggling financially. I mean, know, being poor is, subjective. We didn't have, um, a lot of money, but, so I asked my mom's like, if we don't have a lot of money, why do we like let all these people live with us all the time? And my mom said, that's what God would want us to do. He wants us to serve others. And I was, I was like 7 years old, and I just always remembered that. And you reminded me of that when, you shared that quote. But yeah, in growing up, school was always emphasized in our household. Um, my older brothers and sisters were like always good in school, and it was kind of a competitive thing between us siblings, like who could get the best grades. Um, and basically that was what my parents taught us, is to study hard and to work hard and to get into a good college. And then that will like take us to where we need to go. And, obviously like we know now with like the academic landscape that there's like um, more to a career than just your credentials. Uh, but, my parents being immigrants and, being, strong believers of the American dream, that's what they knew. But they taught us what they knew, which is to work hard and study hard and get into a good school. And so I always, um, I always got straight A's growing up. I did play sports, and I would have loved to play, um, football at the next level. I was the captain of the football team, captain of the judo team. Um, I was 1 degree away from like a black belt in judo. So I loved playing sports, but, I just wasn't good enough to, I would have loved to get an athletic scholarship. Um, but yeah, always worked hard and studied hard. And honestly, I would have been happy to just go to, BYU. Like BYU is my dream school. All my siblings all went to BYU
Was that BYU
Provo.
Provo or Hawaii?
BYU
Provo?
Provo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and like, I like really wanted to go there, wanted to play football there. That would have been like the dream. Um, and then my senior year, I had a better than 4.0 GPA because I took AP classes and got like, you know, the extra credit from taking those AP classes. And I had a few classmates, that were at Stanford. And I'd also just like, another thing my parents always emphasized growing up were just like the extracurricular activities. And again, this might be something that, this might be a concept that maybe is dated now, because like now everybody has their kids in every extracurricular activity. So you got to be like more selective of like what they actually want to do. Um, but yeah, I did a lot of, I did choir. I did, um, like, things in the summer. I would always do like either school or some kind of camp, like an athletic camp. Um, and, and yeah, so I feel like by the time I got to my senior year, I had a pretty robust, resume to be able to apply to schools. And, because I had some friends that were at Stanford, it felt attainable to me. And so I decided to apply to Stanford, and thinking back on it now, it's like kind of crazy to think that I ever thought that I could get in. 'Cause, it's like the acceptance rate is so low. Um, and I also remember my dad telling me when I was applying to Stanford, he said, "Why do you apply to Harvard as well?" And I said, "Dad, come on, that's Harvard. Like, I'm no way I'm getting into Harvard." We couldn't. And then, like I was just like 17 years old. I didn't realize that, like, just because I had a few buddies at Stanford, that it's like, it's really hard to get into Stanford as well. Um, but fortunately, was able to get in, and uh, and and yeah, that kind of like, I loved my experience there, and it changed the trajectory of my life for sure.
Yeah, because I'm curious how you even found out about playing this whole college game. Because really, I think thinking back to my time of like exploring colleges and stuff, I had no idea that Northwestern was even a thing. But the only reason I found out about it was through this other program that I did. And so I really had to kind of navigate the whole college world, like applications and essays and all the things really on my own. And so for you, when you were trying to find colleges or look at the next step after high school, who was helping you along the way? Or if there was, how did they help you make it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, honestly, I did not know the college game. I was 100% on the schools I applied for and the schools I got into, because I applied to two schools. I applied to BYU Provo, and I applied to Stanford. Um, I was supposed to apply to like BYU Hawaii and BYU Idaho as well, but I like missed the checkbox, because when you apply to BYU, like it applies to all three of them. But I forgot to check the box to say that I wanted to apply to. My mom was pissed. She was like, "What the heck? Like, what if you don't get into BYU Provo?" Like, and so anyway, yeah, I did not know anything about the college game. Like the first time, I, so I think the benefit, obviously, like I had just mentioned, extracurriculars are kind of like played out. Like people are putting their kids in like everything, but if your kids are really interested in something and you want them to expand their horizons, and it's better than them like, it's good to develop socially and intellectually. Anyway, all this to say that is like through all my extracurricular activities, one of them was speech and debate. And that was the first time I had ever been to Stanford campus, because there, in my freshman year of high school, we went to a speech and debate tournament at Cal Berkeley. And my friend on the team, who was a senior, her name is Noelle Spring. She got into Stanford. And she was on the speech and debate team. So we all went and visited Stanford with her, and we all like got like Stanford gear, even though like our tournament was at Cal Berkeley. We were like all trying to support Noelle. um, and yeah, and that was like when I first went to that campus, I was like, man, this is beautiful. Um, yeah, they just have like this old, like, I think it's like a Spanish architecture, but they have this like Stanford Chapel. It's just beautiful. Um, and yeah, and then by the time I was a senior, um, I want to say there were four kids at Stanford that were from Kahuku, which is like really unique, because Kahuku is the high school I went to, is a public school. It's not very well funded. Public education in Hawaii in general is not really good. It was in the bottom of the 50 states in the U.S. So it's really unfortunate, and really like Kahuku at that time it's just special, because they just have people that are really invested in the students and make do with what they have. Um, anyway, so having like visited Stanford my freshman year, and then having like seen like four of my friends that were at Stanford, and then I also had like a handful of friends that were applying to Stanford with me, and two of us ended up getting in. So once I was a freshman at Stanford, there are six kids from Kahuku. Um,
Wow.
yeah, which is kind of crazy. Like a lot of the kids from Hawaii that go to Stanford, they come from like the private schools, Punahou, which is the school that Barack Obama went to, um, Kamehameha, which is this like really well-funded private school, Iolani. Um, yeah, those are mainly mainly the good schools that feed into the Ivies and Stanford from Hawaii. And so to answer your question, I had no idea what I was doing with applying. I did when I was filling out my application. I asked my friend Noel for help to read my essays, and to help me just put everything together. My older siblings, um, they like helped to read over my essays and everything. Um, but yeah, it's not like when I got to Stanford, I realized that I had classmates that had been preparing their whole life to come to Stanford. And they, when I was at Kahuku, I took 6 AP classes, which to me felt like a lot because, um, at Kahuku, they told us you could only take an AP class if you're a junior or a senior. And we recommend that you only take 2 AP classes per year. And then I took like 3 per year because I was like, oh yeah, I want to be a cut above the rest. I want to be better. And then uh, and then I went to Stanford and my friends were like, oh, 6 AP classes. I took like 6 AP classes my freshman year. And I was like, what? Crazy. Like they, like I said, they had been preparing for this their entire lives. They had, really good schools they went to, um, people that they know that had gone through that system. And like you mentioned, it's a game, and a lot of times and I know that that word game might give it a bad connotation, but, what I mean is that there's a system and there is a process. And if you're new to it, then you don't know the system or process and you're trying to feel your way around. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, because even for college, I remember because I was the same as you, where I only applied to 4 schools, and all 4 of them were, like, kinda tough to get into. I literally didn't get into any of them except for Northwestern. And it was the last one that I heard back from, and I was
Meant to be,
stressing,
meant
and
to
then I
be.
finally get the letter. It was. And then I finally get the letter, and then it says I'm accepted, and this huge wave of relief comes over me, and then I'm chilling, and then I actually get out here. And then there's this moment where I'm like, "Oh, dang, this is Northwestern," where we're, like, studying hard for the next exam that's coming the next day, and it's, like, 2 in the morning, and we're with friends trying to get through. So for you, when you find out you got into Stanford, and then you go out there, did you have that moment where, like, "Oh my goodness, this is Stanford?"
Yeah, I'm trying to like, yeah, what I had just so my roommate my freshman year at Stanford, he's like one of the smartest guys I know. He Yeah, he's probably the smartest guy in our freshman dorm, which I'm like so glad that he was my roommate. Um, he studied econ and he became an investment banker. Um, and we message each other every now and again, but he was like always so kind to me. Um, even though he's like extremely smart. But one thing that I learned pretty quickly when I was talking to him is that he had a plan coming into Stanford. So he knew I want to do economics. I'm going to be an investment banker. I'm going to make XYZ amount of money. Like for me, I didn't even know I didn't know what economics was. Like I had never taken an econ class in my life. I didn't know what investment banking was. All the people in Laie, like the main sources of economy in Laie are the college, UIU Hawaii, and the Polynesian Cultural Center, like you mentioned. So really, the only business in town is tourism and academics, and those are my models growing up. And so, uh, going into Stanford, all I knew was like, oh, I really like history. Um, I had done this program in high school called History Day that had taken me to Washington D.C. to compete against other students around the country and won a scholarship. But all I knew is I liked history and that I wanted to be a history professor. There were a lot of professors in my ward, in my church congregation, because they were teaching at BYU Hawaii. And so when I went to Stanford, I thought, maybe I'll major in history and I'll become a professor. Um, and that's all I didn't know about Silicon Valley. I didn't know about tech. I didn't know about computer science. Um, and I didn't know about the finance world that my roommate was in. And so that was a learning curve for me. Um, Going to Stanford is just like being exposed to that and knowing how to navigate that. And like we mentioned before, learning the system and the process and learning the game. And, and honestly, I never really figured it out, um, until, I was lucky to get a really good job out of college, but I didn't know about internships, um, and return offers and
Yeah.
things like that.
Well, even for me, when I first came out here, I was, like, in the same boat as you. I had no idea. I guess I just applied to a couple schools and found out I got into this one, so I came out here, and then everyone's talking about this whole thing called, like, private equity, and I'm completely lost in this stuff. And then someone he was a sophomore at the time, he kinda took me under his wing, and he coached me through my resume and then how to apply to internships and different opportunities, and he would always send, like, some job posting
Wow.
that I would go and apply to, and so he was really the one who taught me this whole game. So, kinda thinking back, what advice would you give for someone who's entering this whole new college or recruiting game for them to go on and do big things?
Yeah. Um, that's a good question. I've been trying to think about it in preparation for this. And I think for me, when I was in college, I didn't know, like I mentioned, I didn't know anything about business, anything about technology, um, anything about finance. And, uh, and what I did was I just like started taking classes, taking economics, computer science, um, and learning about these different subjects. And, even at Stanford, excuse me, they encourage you to kind of explore and find your interests and your passions. And so, I think like the advice that I would give to my younger self or someone in this situation when they come to college and don't really know the game, my advice would be just to explore and to be decisive about, because I think like it'll hurt you less if you like try something and realize you don't like it. Um, that will that will not hurt you. What will hurt you is if you spend like a ton of time trying to make that decision, and then you like lost all that time, um, as opposed to like if you like take, um, like for example, if you have a decision coming up of like what to major in, um, and you're like, oh, maybe I should learn about this, and then you're like, I don't know, uh, like I feel like a more optimal approach would be to take, um, let's take a unit of time. Let's just say like a month or whatever. Take a month and learn about like 30 different things. And if you don't like something, just move on to the next thing. Um, as opposed to like, I think a lot of times when I didn't know the system, I felt stuck and I was really slow in my decision making. And that would prevent me from being able to eventually get to where I wanted to go. Because in reality, if you don't know about it, the only way you're going to know is through failure and through trying. And so, um, failure, you know, won't hurt you as much as delay will hurt you. Like delaying a decision. And so just go out there and do things, make decisions. If they don't work out, then pivot, do something else. I think that's the
Yeah.
advice that I would give.
Yeah, I love that. And I wonder, what do you think of this thing? I think I got it from Atomic Habits, which is one of the books that I reread recently. And it was talking about this idea of the exploit and explore trade off, where early on in your career or whatever it is, like choosing a major for school, he he suggests that you spend most of your time exploring different things, different majors, different topics that you really, really love, and then choose one that you actually want to pursue. And then once you have that one, then you exploit it where now you're not exploring as much, but you're exploiting that specific major or topic that you really want to explore. And it's kind of this framework that I've been taking into like all the internships that I want to do. Because I want to do a whole bunch of cool things. I have no idea what I want to do out of college, but right now I'm just exploring and dabbling in a whole bunch of random things. And then once I hit on the thing that I want to go do in the future, then I'm just gonna like exploit that to the most that I can.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that framework is like super applicable and is like something that I've done in my career. I work in tech, and I found my niche in tech. But yeah, I think I wish I would have like had that knowledge in college when like learning different things and to be more exploratory. And that also like brings up something that I just thought about now is just like a big thing that I keep relearning in my life is this thing about limiting beliefs. Um, and yeah. And I don't know if that's also from Atomic Habits, right? Maybe it is.
It's from a whole bunch of different books.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I feel like in some ways growing up and in college, in some ways, I was very confident and self-assured, but in other ways I had a lot of limiting beliefs. Um, like I felt like I couldn't explore because I was like, you know, I have a, I had a really good scholarship to Stanford, but there's still a lot that I had to pay out of pocket, or not out of pocket, out of student loans. Um, but so because of that, I thought I can't explore. I need to settle on something right now so that I can get my degree done as quickly as possible. Um, and that's a limiting belief, um, the, the limiting belief is maybe like the constraint is that I have to graduate in 4 years and I can't change that. But the limiting belief is to think that, I don't have enough time to explore all my interests. Um,
Yeah,
and
more on that. When you first went out to Stanford, because something that I've seen is like I could come out here to Northwestern and think, you know what, because I don't have this background in the whole finance world, or because I'm a Tongan and I haven't really been through this whole college game, that I can't do cool things. And so for you when you were at Stanford, what do you think was a unique advantage you had as an islander or Polynesian from the islands that you brought to Stanford and could take into your career?
yeah, I yeah, hopefully I communicate this the correct way. I think that the Polynesian people are really proud people. Um, and it's the same thing for my family. Like I felt really confident going into Stanford, which is like so, which is like so counterintuitive. And a lot of it was like not false confidence, but it was just like me not knowing enough about the world and and just being like really confident in myself because I didn't know any better. Um, but like that was like something that I feel like was always taught growing up is hard work and like knowing that I can, I can do anything that I set my mind to. Um, like I mentioned in so the hard work part is like, I always felt like I could keep up when it came to hard work. I felt like, when I was this isn't healthy and I don't recommend it. And I didn't, realize until years later that this is like something was wrong with my mental health, at Stanford. And I'm not poo pooing it. I'm just saying that like when I was a freshman at Stanford, like, mental health and wellness was not really a thing. This was back in 2009. Um, so like a lot of times I was working so hard and I didn't know anything about burnout or anything like that, which I know now, um, but hard work I felt like was something I could always keep up. I did like at least one all-nighter a week in my freshman year at Stanford. And like obviously that is not efficient or good and I don't recommend it, um, but the reason why I felt like I could work hard is because it was modeled for me growing up. My parents both worked, um, all my life. My mom worked 9 to 5 for the university and my dad worked two, full-time jobs. And the only time like on a day to day when I see my dad was when he'd be coming home from his night shift, his graveyard shift. And I'd be leaving to school. And then, also like as I was going to bed, he'd be leaving to his graveyard shift. And so he worked 16-hour days for my entire life, pretty much. Um, and that drove me as well because I felt like I needed to live up to their hard work and to, their legacy. The other thing they always told me is that like, um, I don't know if this is like just a Tongan thing, but they always talked about our ancestry and how like, um, and I think it is a Tongan thing because, like every Tongan's like, oh, I'm related to the king or whatever, like in some way. And it gives them like some kind of pride and confidence in their path going forward. But it's the same thing in my family. Like, um, my, my grandpa just passed last year, and my grandpa, was the valedictorian in his class at Leona High School in Tongan. Um,
The Ducks.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and my aunt was as well. And they were like always were teasing. They were like at my grandpa's funeral, they were like teasing my dad that he wasn't a valedictorian. um, but then I was a valedictorian in my high school. Um, my my mom's oldest brother is like one of the first modern doctors in Tonga. Um, and so they would always tell me these things like, "Oh, you're smart, just like your grandpa. You're smart, just like your uncle." And it made me believe that. And it made me believe like, yeah, like so even like when I was at Stanford, I never felt like I was behind intellectually. I just felt like I hadn't had exposure to as many things as my classmates had. Um, but I always felt that confidence, and I always knew that I could work hard. And I feel like I got that from my upbringing.
That's awesome. And then when you were taking that into Stanford, you eventually make it through and graduate. And looking ahead, how did you get into the tech world or your first job out of college? And then thinking through what was going to be your next steps even after that.
Yeah, sure. So, um, yeah, I thought I was going to be in academia and be a professor of history. I did this research assistantship, um, for this history, like, other than they call it a history lab. It's called the spatial history lab at Stanford. And it made me realize that I didn't want to do that, at least right away out of college. I didn't want to be in academics. And also I got married the year, the summer between my junior and senior year, um, in college. And then my wife got pregnant a few months after we got married. And so that really put the pressure on me because I was like, you know what, like I need to get a job. And my wife like gave up jobs and gave up her career, in order to move out to California to be with me. Um, and like I had just being in proximity of Silicon Valley, I'd always been exposed to like the energy and the startups that were happening. Like in one of my sophomore year of college, um, they at Stanford, they make you take this writing course, or this writing and presentation course, and I did my project on Facebook. And this is when Facebook had first hit 1 billion users, and there started to be like, and this was in 2012. Because I went on my church mission between my freshman and sophomore years. Um, but yeah, having like, and when I just go around Palo Alto, I'd walk past, um, like, I'm trying to remember some of the offices that were there, but, I had a friend that worked for LinkedIn and like had me over for lunch at LinkedIn. I had a friend that worked at Facebook when they first moved into Menlo Park. He did sales for Facebook, and, he had me like there for lunch, eating lunch on their rooftop, their building in Menlo Park. Um, and so just like being in proximity, seeing people that were in tech, I thought this was amazing. Um, and then I was trying to think of like, how can I break into tech? Obviously I'm not an engineer. I had, majored in history and I minored in economics, um, at Stanford, but I didn't feel like I didn't have any real business experience. Um, but I had read an article about sales and how like the tech sales job is like the next like iBanking thing, which, it kind of is like, it's like one of the, like probably at every tech company, like other than the CEO, probably like the next highest compensated employees are salespeople. Um, and so I, I didn't have any sales experience, but there was this company, Oracle. They're a pretty big, tech company. They have a sales development program for new college grads. A sales development rep is like this entry level sales job. You set appointments for the salespeople that close, sales. And I went through this interview process. I had no work experience, but I like talked about my mission and how like I spent 2 years knocking doors and, selling religion to like people that weren't interested in it. And so, I know something about that, like made them really believe in me. And so I got an offer from Oracle, and then um, a friend that I knew at Stanford was working at this startup in Utah that focused on sales technology. It was a company called Inside Sales, and he told me like, "Hey, like you're really interested in tech sales?" It's like, yeah, I think like it could be a really lucrative career. I'm not an engineer, but this is a way that I could stay close to sales. I mean, stay close to technology. Excuse me. Um, and he said, "Well, why don't you come work for me? You won't be a sales rep, you'll be a consultant, and you'll be working with sales teams. And you'll be selling this technology that sits on Salesforce. Salesforce is like one of the biggest like tech software that are technology and software products that's used by sales reps." Um, and so I was like, okay, cool. Like he um, gave me like a kind of like a more impactful job, better pay in Utah, which is where my wife is from. So she loved that. Um, instead of like for us having to grind it out in the Bay Area where I would have been working for Oracle. Um, and so that's how I broke into tech and got to work out. At the time, it was like one of the best startups in Provo. But it was also like during a time when a lot of startups were really hyped up. Um, and this startup had investment from Salesforce, Microsoft. I worked with like clients like Google, um, Citrix, which is like at the time a really big company, GE, which at the time, I think GE is making a comeback, but like the time there's still like a big brand. Um, and this is just me fresh out of college. They would send me to these places by myself to go and set up our software with them and implement change management with their teams and try to convince people to use our software to help them sell better. But yeah, that's how, and honestly, I became, there's a lot of things about the tech industry that I've become kind of jaded to, but I really just love tech, like how, just like how it can like enable, it just like increases productivity and it increases like our capacity as like companies and as individuals to be able to achieve so many things. And so I still love tech. There's a lot that's like, over the past, few years, especially now, tech is getting hit really hard financially in this economy. But I still love the industry and love working in tech.
Yeah. That's a really cool story. That's how you came into the tech world out of college with a history major and then went in through it through sales, which I think is probably the number one skill to have, which is one of the skills that I'm trying to develop as I go in my career is too. And so when you were going through the startup world and really entering that, how did you make the decision to go back to school and get your MBA?
Yeah, yeah. So when I started my career, I worked at, so it was kind of a crazy deal working for this first company, Inside Sales. They're, they got acquired and they don't exist anymore. So, um, like there's some crazy stories from that time. Uh, but I had worked at Inside Sales. I was part of, um, I worked there for 2 years and then they started having layoffs. Honestly, they had layoffs throughout my whole time there. I tried to count and I think there were like 8 rounds of layoffs before I eventually got cut as well. And it was, it was really, uh, painful experience because it's my first job out of college. I still am really young and, um, like I took it really personally, even though like, I was being laid off with 250 other people, like my whole team got laid off. But, and then I had worked at, two other startups that were kind of like equally, um, on bad footing financially. Um, and so for me, I really loved, the companies that I worked for. But like, and really, you know, I kind of give a lot of credit to my wife for this. I feel like she had a lot of, foresight to just like be like, hey, like, tech is kind of a crazy world. Um, it's normal to get laid off. Like Spotify just had a layoff, last week or yesterday, which is like so unfortunate. We laid off 1,500 people. But if you work in this industry, you're probably going to get laid off at some point. Um, and so my wife was saying like, I know you love your job. I know you love your team right now, but this would be a good investment to go back to school and to learn and to also get, the credential of like a top 10 business school. Um, and so I wasn't really sold at first, but, I also talked to a lot of people. I looked at the numbers like of what was the expected salary coming out of business school versus what I was making now. Um, and the different types of roles that MBA graduates went into. Um, and, honestly still felt some skepticism and kind of like took a leap of faith to do the GMAT, which the GMAT is like a grueling process in and of itself. Um, and then applying to schools is like another grueling process. Um, but yeah, I ended up at Duke University, which I'm like really, it changed my life, not just my career trajectory, but also just my wife and I have, my wife and I have kids. Like we love North Carolina and we would have never came out here if it wasn't for Duke University. We would never have discovered all the things we love here on the East Coast. Um, and, and yeah, so I know I kind of jumped around a lot there, but yeah, I was looking for more stability, looking to be able to get more credentialed and more learning, knowing that I wanted to work in an industry that's really volatile like tech.
So now that you're at Duke, what was do you think the biggest lesson that you've learned in business school?
Yeah, good. Biggest lesson that I've learned in business school. This might sound like really obvious, but I think like the, the biggest lessons I've learned in business school is that, um, every problem and every solution deals with people in a business. Um, and I think like when I was younger in my career, I kind of poo-pooed management or leadership. I thought it was just like a bunch of fluff. I thought like, you know, you just needed to be good at your job. You needed to know I was really big on technical skills. So early in my career, I had become really good with data um, and I just thought like that was the way to, fix things is, through different technology and skills. But in reality, like, any big problem you face in a business has to do with some management problem or some leadership problem or some people problem. If it was just all logical and if it was just an equation that you could figure out, then it would be easy. But like the hard part is like trying to deal with other human beings that have different, um, intentions and different, desires than you do and trying to align all those people around a common goal. Um, and, it's the same thing if you want to scale a business. Like there's a lot of technology we have to like, you know, and, I see this a lot too, like on different like, podcasts I listen to or books I read, like how do you scale something? You can scale it through technology. Basically you can scale it through technology, through process or through people. And at some point, technology is going to be tapped out. At some point, the process is going to be as refined as possible. But it's really the people part that's going to be your bottleneck. And if you can't figure out the people part, um, then you're going to naturally have a ceiling on whatever, accomplishment you're trying to go after. Um, and so I feel like I just like spoke and said a bunch of fluff, but, but I really do feel like
No,
I
I
didn't,
like the
you know,
people. Because I completely agree with that. I think as I've been really diving into the whole business world, like podcasts and books and stuff, and even in practice with internships and actually building a startup, I think people is probably the most important piece of the puzzle. And not only that, but as a leader, trying to build the type of culture that you want in your business or your company, I think is really, really important. And it's because of that piece of people and how essential they are to make everything work. Because if the culture is completely off and people hate to do what they to do what work is, then it's just gonna all fall apart, and that's what I'm a big believer in. And it's really cool to hear that you gain those business education and business knowledge at business school, and so you go out there and then coming out, you I think you headed back over to one of the companies that you worked at before, and then this whole deal of pickleball, which I really wanna dive into.
Yeah.
So what's the big deal with pickleball, and why the heck is it blowing up, especially for all the Polynesians out there?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Like, yeah, pickleball is just so fun. It's like such a social sport. Um, and I always feel like, and I feel like there's some part that's like natural to Polynesians because you always have those OG Tongans that are always playing tennis. I don't know if you had that around you growing up, but like,
My uncle my bro, that's literally, like, all my uncles.
yeah, yeah. You
They
always have
all
those,
made the shift over to pickleball.
yeah, yeah. You always have those OGs that play tennis. They just stand in the middle of the court. They like don't even run at all. They just like are so good at being efficient with their hits. Um, Yeah, I don't know. So like for me, my wife, one day was like, "Hey, like I saw this thing on TikTok, pickleball, like," and she got some paddles for us on Amazon, and we went and played with some friends, and like we didn't know the rules, and we're just like, yeah, it's just fun because I feel like it's a mixture. It's like you move around enough to make it feel like a real sport, but then it's also like a real big mind game. So like there's a lot of strategy to it, and so I think like that's why, and there's a big social aspect to it. The court is so small, you can talk to everybody on the court. Whereas like if you're playing tennis, the court is so big, you're not really talking in between points. Uh, but yeah, I love pickleball. My wife and I like got hooked on it and play tournaments all the time. Um, I, I told my friends I'm trying to cut back on pickleball, and by cutting back, it's like going from playing 5 days a week to playing like once a week. Um, just to save my body but like, I still play more than a lot of people play. Um, which, they said, how did you cut back on pickleball? And I said, oh, it's easy. I just took up cocaine, it was like, just switch one addiction for the other. but, but, um, but yeah, so I like got really big into pickleball and then, yeah, kind of going back a little bit, I worked at Twitter, out of business school. We could talk more about that if you like, but I got laid off from Twitter. It's been kind of a crazy drama there. They've like had a tons of layoffs there. So in between Twitter and my next job, I wanted to work on a project and I said, oh, like I want to do something with data. And one of the things that I wanted to do is like, I didn't see my wife and I are big pro pickleball fans. We watch a lot of like the pro tournaments on TV or on YouTube. And they don't have any websites that like aggregate the stats for pro pickleball. So it's not like NBA or NFL. You can just go to ESPN.com and look up the stats for a player. There's nothing like that for pickleball. And so I created a website called Picklelytics. And I have a database of pro pickleball results of tournaments, starting with it's all the tournaments in 2023. And that's something like 30 tournaments and, hundreds, maybe thousands of matches that have happened. I scrape this data from websites online. I do some data engineering to get it all cleaned up in a table. And then I aggregate it and put it on this website, Picklelytics. And then I also post on the Picklelytics Instagram account I do rankings. So based on the results, I rank who are the best players in the world in pickleball. And I do predictions. So using this data, I created a machine learning model to predict like different outcomes of different matches. And so I'll post my predictions and it's just a fun thing. I get engagement from different pro players that are like, oh, hey, like, is this really my record? Like, I didn't know that. And I was like, yeah, man, like you can't really see this stuff anywhere else. Like, these players play hundreds of matches and it's unless they're tracking it themselves and writing it down themselves all the time, they like won't know their record or they won't know how many medals they won. Um, and yeah, like it's been fun just to like have interaction with some of these pro players. And yeah, I'm like looking forward to, trying to grow, it's a content play. So I'm trying to, I think that's the only way to monetize a product like this. I'm not sure someone will just like pay for access to the data. So I'm trying to grow the content side. I'm like very new to content, um, but yeah, it's like something that's just fun for me. It's a fun something that I'd probably do even if it wasn't making money. Um, but yeah, it's like I have this little like link on the website where you could tip. It's a tip jar, and the other day in the middle of the night, I get this email, and it says like, so and so Venmoed you on Picklelytics, and I was like, man, there are people out there that appreciate this stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I was like, it was just a tip. He just tipped me for like this thing. So, um, yeah, I'm trying to do the content. I need to like get my ducks in a row. Um, and I think my strategy is that, I've been mostly Instagram and the website for now, but my bottlenecks right now is I need to figure out some of the stuff, on my data engineering side, because this is kind of geeky stuff, but like the ETL process from like scraping data on the internet and then putting it on my website is like, it takes too long. So I need to optimize that so that I could just do it in a couple clicks. And then I could focus all my time on the content. And I think I'm going to start with blogs just because I feel like they're the lowest effort thing. And then they can also give me signals of what topics people like to hear about in pickleball. And then that's once I learn my audience better and what subjects they like to hear about, I think that's when I'll expand to podcasting. But, this is all like
That's exciting, man.
it's
That's
exciting, but
really
it's
cool.
like, it's all theoretical. So we'll see if
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
can execute on that. But,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a fun
I
thing,
think it's awesome. Exactly. It's all part of the game. It's like you're starting this new game of pickleball business. And as you like start playing, you'll get better and better as you go. And so I think it's really cool. And there's definitely people out there, especially the Polynesians who are obsessed with pickleball. So they'll definitely have to get in touch with you. So yeah, and I think in closing, there's this question that I always ask, and I always like to see different perspectives and different answers. And for you, John, if you could put up a sign, and this sign goes on every Polynesian and Pacific Islander home, and every time an Islander walks in and out of their home, they're gonna see the sign every day, and millions of people are gonna see it. What would that sign say and why?
Yeah, for sure. Love this question. And I've been thinking about it when you emailed me it, but, um, one of my favorite books and one of my favorite like motivational speakers to follow is David Goggins. Um, and so I would go with a quote from him. A quote I really like from him is he says, the most important conversations that we have are the ones that we have with ourselves. We wake up with them, we walk around with them, we go to bed with them, and eventually we act on them. Um, and so, yeah, that would be like kind of like I don't know. That's been my vibe, my phase the past couple of years of my life is like realizing, like being careful of like the conversations I have with myself and the limiting beliefs that I put on myself. Um, and like catching myself when I like, I'm telling myself that I can't do something or telling myself that I'm not good enough for this thing or that I'm artificially creating some blocker to something that I want to achieve. And I think it's, very applicable to the Polynesian community because, Polynesians were very spiritual, but in a lot of ways we're also very superstitious, and like, I remember this one time, um, like I love my mom and dad. This one time, my mom and I were disagreeing on something and she said like, well, aren't you afraid? Like if you don't like follow this thing that like something bad will happen to you. Um, and it's like the classic Tongan thing. Like if you disobey your parents, you're gonna get in like a car accident or something. It's like superstitious about certain things. Um, and those are limiting beliefs. Like um, when we think like, oh, I, like a lot of times we have these limiting beliefs and we have these superstitions and we don't realize it until we take a step back and analyze our thoughts. Um, And also, like, a lot of times the voices in our head and the self-doubt that we have are like the hardest. We are our own harshest critics. And so that's why I also like this quote from David Goggins, that the most important conversations we have are the ones that we have with ourselves, to, remember to, um, be realistic, like, to, you know, I don't like saying like give ourselves grace, because I don't want to be like a Instagram feel good, like reels, like motivational speaker. But like, you might not even be realizing it, but when you wake up in the morning, you might think like, man, like I need to get my life together. Like I can't do anything right. Like I can't, like, you don't even know you're telling yourself these things until you take a step back and talk to someone else about it, and they'll be like, what are you talking about? Like you're XYZ, you're crushing it. You're like doing great things. Um, and so, yeah, I know that I kind of like rambled on about that explanation, but
Oh,
that's
that's good.
one of my favorite quotes.
That's really good. Man, I love to hear that, and I think it'll definitely hit home for a lot of the people who are listening to this for sure. And if there is someone listening to this and they really want to connect with you, either if it's pickleball or any of the other things, how could they reach out and support what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. I love talking with people and helping any way that I can. Like I mentioned, like growing up, I feel like I didn't have the game, and I'm not like perfect at the game now, but I would love to like share with other people what I've been through. And so, I think like the most public thing that I'm on is probably like LinkedIn. And so like, feel free to connect with me there. Um, I also always tell people they can email me, but like people don't ever take that up because it feels too weird for people. um, but my email is just jon.lautaha@gmail.com. Um, and then I don't really like, I don't really go on Facebook, and I kind of keep my Instagram locked down. Um, but yeah, LinkedIn, love to connect, uh, talk pickleball, anything, um, schools, careers. I might not have the answer, but I might know someone that does, and I could connect you with them.
Awesome. Man, thank you so much for being on the show. And I think your story was really cool. And I hope it was awesome for everyone listening or watching. But we'll see you later. I think looking forward to what the world holds for you. Hey, you made it. Thanks for listening to this Islander success story. If you want more of these, head over to Nesian.news. Sign up for our newsletter. We'll send you an email every single time we put an Islander success story out there. And remember, our mission is to connect and inspire Islanders around the world.